This channel is for educational purposes only. Make sure you do your own due diligence before making any investments. And there is inherent risk in trading, so it's speculative. Just make sure you keep that in mind. Hi, this is Joe. We're going to talk a little bit more about individual bars again. I want to delve a little deeper into what I look for, especially in a pullback. What are the qualities of a pullback that really look attractive to me? Now, this is on the higher time frame and looking at the individual bars. And so, the ones that show up, especially the example I'm going to show today, are the type that is one where you want to be ready to pounce the moment the stock starts showing improvement on the lower time frame. So let's go ahead and get into the example. I want to make sure you guys have a good feel for this. So I do want to kind of focus in on this area right here on the higher time frame. So I got a weekly chart on the left and daily on the right. And then this would be the area on the lower time frame that we're focusing in on. So the goal here is to, try and identify when a stock is pulling back, when it is really attractive, and when we should be really ready to go. The whole idea here, this was GM. It had broken out of a pretty big base going back, and then it started to pull back. And so, looking at the pullback, what I'm looking for is sort of a pullback that's under control. Now, we can see that in the ADX on the pullback on the lower time frame, but it's also helpful to see what's taking place on the higher time frame individual bars. As I mentioned a few weeks back, sometimes you get these big down bars and you know that you probably don't need to jump all over something. But let's say you get a pullback in a situation like this, and if we look at this, actually, you can see that this was the breakout area. So even though it didn't make it all the way to the 18, it was pulling back to price support at 40. And so you wouldn't necessarily be looking for a pullback all the way to the 18. But here are a few other signs. So, you make this strong move and then you start pulling back. So the red bars on here, the reason why I'm using TC2000 today with a black background is because it allows you to do color coding. And so the red bars registered here, all these different red bars, are showing when that particular, in this case, that week, is the narrowest ranged week of the past 7. So if the range between the high and the low, if you add up that distance, if it's the smallest going back 7 weeks, then it's going to show a red bar. And what that tells me is that there is contraction taking place and some compression in place. And as I've said in the past, on trading plays, I'm always looking for to buy contraction or compression and then sell expansion. And I do handle trades differently than I would trending plays. Trending plays, I've showed you how I would trail a stop. I would take targets along the way and then trail a stop. But when I'm trading for a short-term play and I'm using this contraction expansion concept, I'm buying as it's coming out of contraction and then I'm selling when I get expansion move. And so let me just show you how I'd go about doing that. But one of the things I wanted to explain is that if we're getting a pullback, and you can see the size of this bar is probably the biggest of the pullback. So we had this narrow range bar after a big move to the upside that kind of showed that the momentum was slowing. And then we get decent sized bar to the downside and then a smaller bar here on this week. And then this week, it looks like it's trying to turn around. It's sort of a medium-sized bar. And then we get this narrow range bar. And what the narrow range is telling you is that we're coiling, we're building energy for a move. And a lot of times it'll be at a turning point. So after a big run to the upside, you get a red bar, you probably ought to be looking for some kind of a pullback. And then if we get a pullback to the downside and then we get a red bar and all the momentum conditions and the trend is to the upside, then I'm really starting to zero in on the lower time frame thinking I've got maybe an explosive move coming to the upside. So this narrow range bar concept, I think, is really a useful tool to be able to add into your arsenal. Different programs do it different ways. I like the color coding myself. TradingView lets you put a dot underneath a narrow range bar, so you can do it that way as well. I do that on TradingView, but if you can color code it, I think it really helps see it visually. So, if I look at this, I'm looking at the quality of this pullback. And I'm seeing lower high, lower high, lower high. Yeah, and it's made this little high here, but it had no progress. And then we get the narrow range. So this is a pretty high quality pullback in my view. If I were to look at this situation here, which happened, a few weeks later, you had a down bar, here, and then an immediate up bar, and then a test of the high, and then it tried to come back down. You got a narrow range here, but then more follow through. No real cohesive movement. This is a much more high quality pullback than this. And hopefully you can see that. Now, we got a little bit of a push to the upside in this trade, but this, I think, looking for this type of move on a consistent basis that's smoother, no big ratcheted movement on the way down, just a lower high, lower high, lower high, and then get some narrow range or compression. We did have a pinch play develop, and we had strong ADX. Those were all confirming tools, and look at the low volume on the pullback. So these are all the qualities that we're looking for. But when I see this narrow range bar, I'm all of a sudden getting a little bit excited because I know I need to go down to the lower time frame and look for the next trigger, because if it does trigger to the upside, I'm probably going to get an explosive move. So let's go ahead and look at this. So if you notice what took place, the 18 crossed down below the 40 and we closed below. So we had basically a trigger set up on this bar right here, right after the narrow range. And it came down and tested the low. And we also had a zero line reversal developing, and we had low ADX. So all the qualities in place are here, and we know we have this narrow range bar, which to me, let's say I have 5 stocks that are pulling back that have pretty good qualities in them. Maybe they have this, all 5 of them have this, but this is the only one that shows the narrow range. I'm going to play this one because I think the explosiveness of the move working away from a narrow range contraction has more potential, at least from a short-term standpoint. So that's one thing I think I would mention to you is to kind of keep an eye on that. And I'd probably have drawn in a really tight trend line here, play as soon as it crosses. I'd be a lot more aggressive knowing I've got all the pieces of the puzzle in place. Low ADX, zero line crossover. I've got strong pinch play, strong ADX, and low volume on the pullback. And then I get the narrow range bar as a kicker. Now, if you notice, we did have a pretty strong couple weeks to the upside. And then look what happened. We got a couple of narrow range bars developed. And I would say after that first one, I might even consider just getting out. I've had a really big run to the upside. I had a gap day. And then the narrow range shows up showing that the momentum is slowing because we're getting a narrowing of a range, right? Big range bars tend to tell you that there's momentum in place. Smaller range bars means that the momentum is slowing. And so, after a big run, you get a narrow range bar, certainly after you get the reversal bar to follow and then another range bar. I mean, I'm looking to take profits if I'm a short-term trader. So I would probably be doing that on this first bar here, maybe even consider on the gap up bar here, but this red bar was just a great signal to take a profit if you're a trader. And so again, my goal here when I'm trading is, buy compression or the exit from compression. So we have compression here. And then as we start to exit out of that, I want to get long. And then I wanted to expand. And if we see a big expansion bar, like a big green bar like this, okay, I'm going to take a profit. If we don't get that and we get a sign of slowing with the NR7 bar, then that's another reason to take a profit for a short-term trade. Now, that ended up being the peak going for, a month or two. So for me, from a short-term trading standpoint, that was a perfect exit area. So anyway, this is a good thing to keep an eye on. I really suggest, even if you cannot put up the paint bars or put up the dots, just keep in mind what you're looking for. You want to see strong move to the upside. And then on the pullback, you want to make sure the bars are under control. So just to give an example, if we make a move to the upside and then we get a little tiny bar and then we get a big bar and then we get another big bar pullback, that is not really what I'm looking for. You know, I mean, I would have to, I would assume that the ADX is probably not very low on this time frame, but I can see it on the higher time frame if the bars are getting bigger. I want to see a move to the upside and then maybe have a decent bar off the high and then a medium-sized bar, and I want them to start shrinking. I want this to be under control when it's pulling back. And again, if you can get a narrow range bar or an inside bar. So let's say this comes down and this bar is inside of this bar. That's another sign of contraction or compression. So these are the types of things I would be on the lookout for on a pullback to really help you zero in on what could be the best trades going forward. All right. Make sure you ask any questions or post any comments you might have, and we'll talk to you next time.